Trump and Elon Musk are promising Americans a future with a whole lot less government, less bureaucracy, less regulation. Well, my next guests envision a much different future, one with more, not less, of what makes this nation so great. They co-authored the new book that I'm going to say is an absolute must-read. It is called Abundance, and that's exactly where we're going to start. Gentlemen, it's a big word, it's a big idea, and you say abundance describes the future that we want. What does it mean?
Our politics is split right now between a left that defends government even when it doesn't work, and a right that wants to destroy government even when it is working. What we need is a political party that actually makes government work.
This book is about putting outcomes over processes. It's about setting a North Star with a big, bold, beautiful sci-fi vision in the first 3 pages of the book and saying, we can do this, but in order to do it, we have to get out of our own way.
There is a more realistic path.
The answer to a politics of scarcity is a politics of abundance. A politics that asks what it is that people really need, and then organizes government and markets to make sure there is enough of it.
I was wondering, have you found yourself, as you've gotten older, to be personally becoming more conservative?
No, I think I've become more
depressing, dead-end, monotonous, unimaginative, catastrophic.
Now that is why I created New Labour. I did it, it was difficult, it was painful,
but it's
necessary. Because if you come into politics to get something done,
thoroughly confusing the American political scene this year, the new politics of austerity, of abundance.
Government is not simply good at all times. Sometimes government has to get out of the way.
The man who epitomizes the new conservative label.
I feel like we've given far more power to the groups than they should actually have. I think many of these groups are fundamentally unrepresentative of where most Americans stand on the issues.
This package of advice that almost always has to do with alienating traditional left constituencies, essentially.
When I look at policies in New York that stand in the way of abundance, very often if you look under the hood, you eventually find a labor union.
Senior colleagues attacking you and saying that you're engaged in a conspiracy to destroy the soul of the Labour Party. What's your response to that attack?
There is a conspiracy, actually. It's a conspiracy to make the Labour Party capable of winning the next general election.
They're a new generation of Democrats, Bill Clinton and Al Gore, and they don't think the way the old Democratic Party did.
This is a case study in a politics that needs to die.
There you see it at Bush headquarters in Houston with 327 electoral votes for himself on the board by our projection, the president-elect. And
thank you all very, very much. Hey, Jimmy.
That's his son over there behind him. When did the Dukakis people realize that this was not a campaign about competence, but one about ideology?
Well, I think some of them realized it earlier than others, and I think one of those who was the last to realize it, unfortunately for the campaign, was Michael S. Dukakis. The poignancy of the postmortems, and I think the bitterness and harshness in some senses of the recriminations are going to be very, very strong.
So, in a phrase, what do you think we're going to be hearing from Democrats over the next weeks and months?
Well, you're going to hear a lot of bitterness toward Dukakis. Then you're going to have a fight within the party.
Let me ask you this, gentlemen. We've had 28 years of Republican presidents and 12 of Democrats in the last 40 years. So the guy who's there at the end has to be electable.
The presidential campaign of America's discontent.
More people are living in poverty. Unemployment is the highest in nearly a decade.
Who's to blame? The Republican president and the Democratic Congress point fingers at each other.
The American people have been constantly looking for an alternative.
Most have turned sour and cynical.
It's time for change. It's time for someone smart enough to know, strong enough to do, sure enough to lead, the comeback kid.
The third way arose from the winds of Thatcher, Reagan, and neoliberalism and said, we'll accept all of the baselines of global predator capitalism. We will portray our core constituencies.
What is it they're trying to do? They're trying to save the Democratic Party.
Governor Clinton, you have the next closing statement. Ladies and gentlemen, of all the people running, I've spent the largest number of years trying to come up with new ideas.
Now, what is the lesson that the Democrats and New Labour take? Well, you know what? We'll be even more fiscally conservative than you.
I want to reinvent government to make it more efficient and effective.
We can be the party of opportunity again, not the party of government.
Give up on the notion that there is such a thing as a public good.
The Tories didn't get everything wrong in the 80s. I mean, let's just be honest about that. Admit it.
Demonize the production of public goods and the agencies that do that.
A Clinton administration won't spend your tax dollars on programs that don't solve problems and a government that doesn't work.
I always thought this new liberal was a bit glib and a bit sordid, because if you, after 8 years of Reagan and 4 of Bush, to conclude that the main problem in American politics was that the Democratic Party was too much to the left, seemed to me a weird conclusion.
And it's a mindset that has been cultivated by a worship of nerdery, a worship of credentials, a worship of information without context, a worship of vague ideas about persuasion and debate instead of power.
Is it mostly about money?
It's about a lot of bureaucracy.
It's about all of it. Money is a problem, bureaucracy is a problem, but there is a lack of connection between process and outcome.
I believe in a politics that's more oriented around a concept of liberalism that doesn't fear corporate power specifically, but fears abuse of power wherever it comes from. Right? Corporations build apartments that people live in. They also withhold wages. They do good and they do bad.
The president came west this week to talk with high-tech leaders about issues like that. Last night, he dined with an elite group of Silicon Valley executives, including Google's Eric Schmidt, Apple's Steve Jobs, and Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg.
The Labour Party seems to be very close to the Conservative Party. There doesn't seem to be a way of distinguishing between the two.
You know, I suppose the difference is
I try to see the world as this really messy place. And that attitude, I think, requires letting go of this idea that the most important and most dangerous boogeyman of society are always corporations.
Because I want the Labour Party, for example, to be a party that's committed to enterprise and to business. And I'm proud of the fact, again, that there are business people today who find themselves perfectly happy and at home in the Labour Party.
And I want to ask Bill Clinton, I mean, in your state, you have a right-to-work state, you disempower labor unions. Workers can't organize collectively and get the protections that they enjoy in 30 other states. Can we really right the balance?
That traditional Democratic constituency has been completely left at the same time as the Democrats have made this pivot towards basically embracing Wall Street.
We are here today because Wall Street has a critical role to play in fulfilling Dr. King's dream of opportunity for all Americans.
You made 3 speeches for Goldman Sachs. You were paid $675,000 for 3 speeches. Was that a mistake? I mean, was that a bad error in judgment?
Look, I made speeches to lots of groups.
But did you have to be paid $675,000?
Well, I don't know. That's what they offered. So.
As long as they're playing the role they're playing in the Democratic Party, you're not going to see trade unions developing more power to give average working people the kind of tools and the clout they need.
They find economists who are friendly to finance, strategists who will tell you how to win, technocrats who will tell you what works and what doesn't and what policies you can choose. And you create this kind of technocratic infrastructure that only talks about policy rather than politics.
I feel like when things get into a mass movement space, you tend to have a kind of an irrationalism, a movement toward extremes. People have this very strong instinct that like the source of a problem needs to be like a small villainous actor.
From the nation's banking leaders today, President Obama.
13 bankers were called into a room to meet with the President of the United States. They were told that they were going to be chastised, that this was going to be the opportunity for the President to vent the public's anger.
They headed some of the largest banks in the country. Throughout the crisis, they had received massive bailouts.
It really, really grates with most people that our tax money went
to support these institutions. And then when the rest of the country was in the worst of the recession, you saw the big traders and the heads of the Goldman Sachses of the world walking out with these multi-million-dollar pay packages.
The president made it pretty clear when he talked to us, we're between you and the pitchforks, guys, and you need to just acknowledge that.
But as the meeting progressed, to their astonishment, it became clear the president was in no mood for confrontation.
And he says, right after that, what we have, gentlemen, is a public relations disaster that's turning into a political disaster. And I'm here to help.
Today, the Obama administration did indeed extend them an olive branch.
It looks like the country's financial giants may have turned a corner.
The president's message to them.
The bankers who left the meeting had already received more than $180 billion from the federal government, with almost no conditions.
No strings attached. I mean, everybody else, homeowners, everybody else who's trying to get a loan, everybody on Main Street, small businesses, not only are they not able to get loans, but if they get anything, there are huge strings attached. How, in good conscience, in good faith, can we not ask the banks, demand from the banks, some conditions upon getting bailed out? That just seemed incredible.
I agree there's some problems in the system, Jerry, but the key is to elect a president who will lead and work with Congress. I think that's even more important than anything you can say about organized interest groups.
And you don't necessarily have to wrap it up in a complex story that belittles elites or finds the bad guy or says, if a company gets relatively big, it's always evil.
At some point you have to win. Not everything, but you have to put winning first. And it has to stop being a question of, yes, I would like to sign the insurance companies out of existence with my pen. It would be sweet. But it has never happened in the history of this country that we've signed a multi-billion-dollar industry employing tens of thousands of people in every district in America out in one shot.
Right now in American politics, I'm pretty comfortable where the liberals fall. In 5 years, in 10 years, I may not be.
In the hours after Kirk's murder, trying to process my own shock, I wrote a piece about him. In that piece, I said, you can disagree with virtually everything Kirk believed about politics. You can detest some of what he believed about politics and still believe that he was there on that stage practicing politics the right way, and wish my own side exhibited more of that spirit, that we went more often to the places where we knew people would disagree with us and talk to them. I think there was a politics of content moderation that took hold that was more about enforcing boundaries of what, were and were not ideas we should be engaged with.
Silencing dissent, deplatforming speakers, hurling unfair charges of racism and bigotry aren't liberal ideas at all, although sadly they've become part and parcel of today's left.
Engaging with them, again, even if opportunistically.
I'm a firm believer that good ideas always beat out bad ideas if you let the light shine on both of them. This show, based on big ideas and honest conversations, talking to people who I both agree with and disagree with,
treated that disagreement as the beginning of a conversation.
It's not liberal or even decent to shout down or silence ideas just because you don't like them.
A lot of people appreciated it, particularly on the right. They felt it saw their friend and their ally more the way they saw him.
And honest debate and free speech, that's really not what's on the left anymore. And again, that's not a defense of the right.
The burden is on you to interact with these provocative ideas if you think they're dangerous or just mistaken.
Yeah.
And show them to be dangerous and or mistaken.
There were many people closer to my own politics who were truly infuriated by it.
I've seen people suddenly calling me a conservative or claiming that I'm a Republican. Just because I talk to Ben Shapiro doesn't mean I share any or all of their beliefs.
A few days before Kirk's murder, I taped an episode with Ben Shapiro. Shapiro is well to my right, a person with whom I have many disagreements, and also a person with whom I've had good conversations over the years. And talking to him about it surprised me. You learn things talking to people that you don't expect. When you get to the scavengers, the way you write about them, the scavenger's a looter, greedy, jealous, and violent. You say the scavenger's a lecher, rebellious, perverse, and leering. The scavenger's a barbarian, jealous, enraged, and violent. Scavengers do not wish for a better world, or at least a better world for everyone. They'd rather be equal in misery than unequal in prosperity. I guess let's talk about Bernie for a second. You call him a putrescent Marxist pimple on the posterior of the body politic.
And I have to say that my brain is still in recovery mode from taking in so many high-level important ideas.
You go to these Turning Point USA events, it's the music, it's the bright lights, it's the t-shirt cannons, and all of a sudden, you're having fun.
Yeah.
And the left is anti-fun. I mean, they're anti-comedic expression, they're anti-creativity. I mean, everything is you're going to offend somebody. You and I spoke at Louisiana State University in the Deep South, in the Bible Belt. And you got a standing
I think I got more applause than you, for the record. I'm just
Totally.
saying.
And then we also had Candace Owens, who got standing ovation.
Yeah.
So I thought this place is supposed to be backwards thinking and bigoted.
Let me say that again. 1 in 22 black men will be a murderer in their lifetime. That is according to the FBI data.
I'm speaking at Liberty University in October.
And Jerry Falwell is an amazing guy, and they're going to welcome you with open arms, and you'll get a standing ovation from them.
He was doing politics. He was trying to persuade people. I've watched on our side, not opportunistic engagement, but a lot of, I would say, counterproductive disengagement. For me, it's not enough to say, we lost, there are backlashes, sometimes you lose. I think it requires like a very fundamental rethinking, like a disciplined strategic rethinking of what have we been doing? Why are people preferring this to us?
When I look at the times that we have lost, if I think specifically about the Black tradition, for instance, it's hard for me to say politically they did something wrong. You know what I mean? Like, Reconstruction falls. What was the thing that should have been done? On the contrary, I see, a kind of courage that I wish we had today in a lot of people. You know what I mean? I see people willing to die and take bullets all the time. What more could Ida B. Wells have done, to get the anti-lynching bill passed? I mean, here is somebody that, was banished from Tennessee on threat of being killed after she saw her friends, murdered and lynched. And one of the things I will say is when I look back at that long tradition, and I look back in the times that people have won and the places they've won, it's often not been their heroism that was the decisive factor ultimately. It's often not been their strategy.
Why are we losing?
We're losing because there are always moments when we lose.
See, that feels very fatalistic to me.
It doesn't feel fatalistic to me. It feels like the truth. Once you understand that Martin Luther King could be standing up, telling his own people, we do not embrace violence at all. It is morally repugnant. We embrace love.
Decided to stick with love. I'm not gonna give you a motto of preacher philosophy, burn, baby, burn. I'm gonna say, build, baby, build, organize, baby.
And that could get you shot. Not burn it down. Love can get you shot. I have ancestry, I have heritage. What that means is that I do whatever I do within the time that I have in my life, whatever time I'm gifted with. And much of what I do is built on what other people did before then.
I despise identity politics. I think it is it's the root of almost everything that is wrong right now, which is why I'm struggling so much with what I would say is my former team.
You would be hard-pressed to have a conversation with a Black person in this country that is a descendant of slavery and not have them be able to reach maybe right here or to tell you themselves, look, my uncle, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, they lived in a small town in Mississippi, in Tennessee, in Alabama. They got into some sort of dispute with a white man, and either they were lynched or we had to run.
If you went to Germany 30 years ago, you really felt all the Holocaust guilt. And it's amazing how much has been flushed out now because of the generations that did the right thing. And that war was over in 1945. Civil War was over in 1865, and we are still at the effect of this underlying stuff that we move on from one generation to another.
And I don't want to sound flip here. Political violence is the norm for the Black experience in this country. It just is. I don't even mean like the Malcolm X, Martin Luther King variety of it, right? Which is the norm too.
Well, do you think there's a little bit of a risk in sort of, a couple of times you're referencing the genocide of the Jews to slavery. Seems like a little bit of a a slippery slope there, no?
Have you read up much on slavery?
Yeah.
We're talking abject slavery, Dave. I mean, nobody's in a contest. Nobody has a monopoly on human suffering. This was abject slavery.
Political violence runs through us. It is our heritage. Is that good? No. Do we valorize it? Absolutely not. Do we minimize it? Absolutely not.
2.5 centuries, and then at the end, there were 4 to 5 million enslaved people. Do you realize generation after generation how many millions of people we're talking about?
A life free of it is not a thing that's really in reach in my time.
Sometimes I think that having a historical scope that wide can make the present too deterministic.
Not that your intentions were not good, you know what I mean? But that the idea of these sort of guilt-ridden white people, many of whom probably, well, certainly none of them in that room owned slaves, and probably many of them never came from descendants of slaves, nor would I think that you're guilty for your father's sins, much less your great-grandfather's sins, etc.
You know, rightly or wrongly, like what they took, and something that really empowered Trump in the last election, was a sense that they didn't. And like, we were against them, and if so, they were going to be against us. And I think that's, in the end, doing politics badly.
There was a certain collective guilt to it that struck me as scary.
For me, watching it as a one-trick pony with no sense of history or empathy, I found it somewhat confusing and upsetting.
I wish people, instead of saying that an expressive or strategic question in politics was betraying or abandoning the people we wish to protect, I wish what we said was we lost power in a way that allowed Donald Trump to drive the Supreme Court to a 6-3 Republican majority, overturn Roe v. Wade, and actually abandon all these people, actually fuck them over, right?
Right.
It is part of, I think, when I say that like the work of politics has become diminished, it is part of how that happened, that talking about this creates this sort of counter argument. Well, even to discuss it is to abandon.
Abandoning it is a very real possibility. I can give you an example from the other side, by the way, too.
Yeah, go for it.
The President of the United States.
A week ago, Bill Clinton would try once again to define his presidency. This time, standing face to face with the man and the Congress who had handed his party a stunning defeat.
In just a couple of weeks.
Why don't you take leadership? You have responsibility. You promised the middle class tax.
In the November elections, workers without a college degree, people making between $15,000 and $30,000 a year, would abandon the Democrats. Parole voters would overwhelmingly choose Republicans, who were promising a revolution in the way Washington works. Across the country, every incumbent defeated was a Democrat.
They want people held accountable. So I'm saying that to that extent, that message, I got it. I accept responsibility for not delivering. To whatever extent it's my fault, we haven't delivered back to the American people what they want on that.
The most sympathetic way I can put it is that I think he's a very skillful politician who is used to being in the middle of conflicting pressures, and he tells himself, I'll say yes to both sides, and somehow down the road I'll be able to finesse the differences. Now that's the sympathetic version. My other version would be that he's not as smart as he thinks he is.
Robert, before we go to the audience for questions, I wonder if I could pick up on something that Bill just said. And why do you have so much company now? What's different now from 6 years ago? The last welfare reform bill passed.
It's really remarkable. I mean, I can remember not more than 3.5 years ago giving a speech to a group of reporters. This is not advocates, but reporters, and talking about the growth of out-of-wedlock births among blacks and whites, and actually having a reporter stand up and denounce me for even broaching the subject.
Thanks for waiting. Duluth, Minnesota. Good morning.
People who are on welfare and who are underserved and underemployed have many human issues that need to be resolved first.
In this nation, $34 billion is owed by deadbeat parents to their own flesh and blood children. $34 billion that will go a long way toward getting these children off welfare.
I have a question here. Should the people, these poor people at the representative, expect some subrogation of their rights, or are they entitled to maybe additional rights? Here in Hawaii, those on the welfare rolls are receiving free automobile insurance.
I introduced a concept of workfare in 1986. I remember being pilloried by my colleagues on the Democratic side at the time.
The governors, as you all know, are very excited and have their ideas. I think in the next few weeks, the president has already indicated a strong interest in working together on this. We should be able to craft a bold new direction in welfare reform.
I think, in part, the credit has to go in, at least in a good part, to work that Bill Clinton did in raising this topic.
He has been called the great communicator. Tonight his forum will be the State of the Union address, his stage the United States Capitol. This man will deliver the Democratic response. Not yet 40, Clinton has been elected governor 3 times already. The National Party leaders like his image. His Democratic roots run deep.
In a certain sense, that was like Nixon going to China for a Democratic president to finally come out and say that and recognize this as a national problem.
It can be the majority party again in the country if it's really responsive to the legitimate needs of the people and has a real credible economic program.
Tonight will be Republican versus Democrat, age versus youth, wealth versus a modest background, a man with his final campaign behind him, a man with many campaigns ahead.
Growing up in the South, I learned values: hard work, family, faith, responsibility, concern for others. It's time to restore the dignity of work in America. That's why I've offered a plan to get this economy moving again and to create good jobs. And we must break the cycle of welfare dependency. I want to end welfare as we know it and restore dignity and self-esteem to every American.
This is truly a wildly historic night. I mean, this is just,
The Republican revolution of Election 94 shook Capitol Hill like an earthquake today. Its reverberations went into state houses and moved the whole political landscape sharply to the right.
the values that you and I represent are so powerful that Bill Clinton's pollsters telling him he'd better imitate us if he's going to get reelected. Now, the problem is, if you're a welfare state liberal, and you don't know how to do that in Washington or Atlanta, you can't very well decide that it is your mission in Somalia to create the small businesses you're killing in America.
I know that scapegoating poor children is politically popular this year, but it is not right.
I think the outlines of the principles that I have embraced on welfare reform are very well known. Indeed, my own views on this are not markedly different from the bill introduced by Mr. McCurdy and others, except for the way that I would propose to pay for it.
This week, there are devastating cuts being proposed for some of the weakest, most helpless, most defensive people in this country, including children, the elderly, and the poor. And even though the bill has serious flaws that are unrelated to welfare reform, I believe we have a duty to seize the opportunity it gives us to end welfare as we know it.
The liberals hide behind children when it's the children that are hurt the worst by this system. That doesn't care, that's not loving and compassionate. Passing out a check behind a bulletproof window in a welfare office is not compassion.
We're going to take this historic chance to try to recreate the nation's social bargain with the poor. We're going to try to change the parameters of the debate. We're going to make it all new again and see if we can't create a system of incentives which reinforce work and family and independence. We can change what is wrong. We should not have passed this historic opportunity to do what is right.
Through 11 presidents and 31 Congresses, we have sought to aid children in poverty. We have not always succeeded, but never until now have we undertaken to do harm. Real welfare reform would not impose deep food stamp cuts on poor families with children, the working poor, the elderly, the disabled, and the unemployed. It would not place at risk poor children whose parents are willing to work but are unable. The premise of the legislation before us is that the behavior of certain adults can be changed by making the lives of their children as wretched as possible. In our haste to enact this bill, any bill, before the November elections, we have chosen to ignore what little we do know about the subject of poverty.
But let's not obscure the fundamental purpose of the welfare provisions of this legislation, which are good and solid and which could give us at least the chance to end the terrible, almost physical isolation of huge numbers of poor people and their children.
This legislation does not reform aid to families with dependent children. It simply abolishes it. 30 to 40% of the caseload will be cut off in less than 10 years' time. That's 4 million children, 3 to 4 million children. And we are putting those children at risk with absolutely no evidence that this radical idea has even the slightest chance of success.
Ron Haskins, who helped draft the Republican bill, says it was a revolution in policy.
Think of a Democratic president that would sign a welfare reform bill like that. President Gore wouldn't have done it. Kennedy's would have never done it. There are many Republicans that wouldn't have done a bill as tough as the one that was passed in 1996.
When we call the Republicans for comment, they will say, well, the report mentions the possibility of improvements due to long-term behavioral impact of a fundamental change in the culture of welfare.
Right.
How big a change would you expect to see if people were told sink or swim?
Well, among children, about half will sink, and that will mean they will be dead, and then they won't bother us anymore.
Welfare will no longer be a political issue. Politicians cannot attack poor people over it. There are no encrusted habits, systems, and failures that can be laid at the foot of someone else.
So to me, I look at the last, 8, 12 years. Mm-hmm. And what I see having happened is we, the coalition I am in, the things I believe in, lost ground. That imposes a set of questions upon us that need to be answered.
Right. The thing I'm struggling with in this conversation and even in that question is the fact that there are things that you yourself have actually advocated for that had they been done, we would be having a very different conversation.
What do you think they should have done that they didn't? And I guess more importantly, what do you think they should do now to get themselves back in the game?
I mean, the first thing they shouldn't have done that they did was let Joe Biden run for re-election at 81 or 82. That was, of everything, the essential mistake, because he was no longer a strong enough political communicator and figure to structure an appeal. I think Joe Biden at 65 would have won re-election. He was a talented communicator. He would have, I think, been in many ways a very strong party leader.
Not since the Civil War has such pressure, political, economic, social, centered on the White House.
Mr. President, as you know, last Tuesday, the annual inflation rate came in at 8.3%. The stock market nosedived. People are shocked by their grocery bills. What can you do better and faster?
Well, first of all, let's put this in perspective. Inflation rate month to month was just an inch.
It's the highest inflation rate, Mr. President, in 40 years.
I got that.
You're not arguing that 8.3 is good news.
No, I'm not saying it is good news, but it was 8.2 or 8.
In the face of a hostile press and a divided Congress, Herbert Hoover makes unprecedented use of government power to encourage recovery. But his fundamental faith is in the rugged individualism of the American people and in private enterprise.
So to continue to put people in a position to be able to make a decent living and grow and increase their capacity to grow.
Is the economy going to get worse before it gets better?
No, I don't think so. We hope we can have what they say, a soft landing, a transition to a place where we don't lose the gains that I ran to make in the first place for middle-class folks, being able to generate good-paying jobs and expansion, and at the same time, make sure that we...
Prosperity is just around the corner, say the hopeful headlines.
13.4 million new jobs.
More jobs in 2 years than any president has ever made in 4 and 2. And folks, it's no accident. That's Bidenomics in action.
And if you're bewildered, panicky at what's happening to you and your country, you aren't alone. One of America's biggest industrialists has openly admitted, I am afraid. Every man is afraid.
Leadership in Washington stands convicted, not because it did not have the means to plan, but fundamentally because it did not have the will to do.
America has a rich, progressive, social democratic history that has been obscured by the right and all too often ignored by the left.
Franklin D. Roosevelt. His campaign promise, a New Deal. His campaign song, Happy Days Are Here Again.
Progressivism of the most progressive sort is 100% American, and the Democrats abandoned it. It was like they were running scared from it. But in running from that, they also run away from the story of the exploitation and oppression that people suffered all those years, and even more significantly, the struggles from below that working people in all their diversity pursued ever since the 1770s. By abandoning those traditions, how are Americans supposed to understand what they're capable of doing themselves?
I recognize that something had to be done about it. One thing that would be effective would be a march of 100,000 Negroes on Washington for jobs.
A. Philip Randolph was a socialist with a capital S,
yes,
and the head of the labor union. And in 1941, when Roosevelt gave the Four Freedoms speech, Randolph heard the speech and treated it as a moment to mobilize a march on Washington, with the idea of demanding the desegregation of the defense industries. Randolph was pretty much convinced that once he got to the White House, which is what Roosevelt did, he invited him to the White House to talk about it, he was pretty much convinced there was no way that Roosevelt would bring him to the White House if he wasn't going to do something.
The president said, Phil Randolph, we can't have 100,000 Negroes marching on Washington. If anything such as that were to occur, we might have bloodshed and death. I said, well, Mr. President, we want to abolish discrimination against Negroes in the government, where there are many jobs. Jobs must be secured for black people in this country, and they must be secured now, not tomorrow, not the next day, but now.
So he signed the executive order ordering the creation of the Fair Employment Practice Commission, and basically this was the beginning of the desegregation of the defense industries. This is the Randolph who later, he called upon African Americans to boycott the U.S. military until it was desegregated, and Truman signed the order of desegregation. Later, Randolph and Bayard Rustin together are the masterminds of the March on Washington, which is an economic and political march.
We are gathered here in the largest demonstration in the history of this nation. Let the nation and the world know the meaning of our numbers. We are not a pressure group. We are not an organization or a group of organizations. We are not a mob. We are the advance guard of a massive moral revolution.
We're not talking about corruption in certain sectors of the economy. We're actually saying yes. Literally, the power center of this country and the world is the barrier.
We had to struggle with the old enemies of peace, business and financial monopoly, speculation, reckless banking, class antagonism, sectionalism, war profiteering. They had begun to consider the government of the United States as a mere appendage to their own affairs. And we know now that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob.
The work of politics, of bridging over a lot of profound, fundamental, moral disagreements, I think became somewhat diminished. We weren't doing a kind of politics that sat with the idea that people were absolutely going to disagree with them and they would need to win over some of those precise people. That their politics would need to be palatable, not just in conversation with that disagreement, but genuinely respectful of it.
Can we hear it for Liz Cheney?
I don't know that we weren't.
That's not a deep fake. That was actually said today. Former Republican Congresswoman, staunch Trump critic Liz Cheney, making that news earlier today.
I think in many ways we've stopped doing politics. We've written a lot of people off. And in writing them off, we are losing.
And I also want to thank your father, Vice President Dick Cheney, for his support.
Lynn and I are so proud of Liz for standing up for the truth, doing what's right, honoring her oath to the Constitution, when so many in our party are too scared to do so. A real man wouldn't lie to his supporters.
Simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction. There is no doubt that he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us.
It probably would have been wiser in retrospect if the White House had focused on the fact that the basis for doing what the president decided to do was not rooted in a single thing.
Think of how often Vice President Cheney told us that we were in imminent danger from an attack from Saddam Hussein because of arsenals of chemical and biological weapons and the rebuilding of the nuclear weapons in Iraq.
That was the reason that we did it. And then we found out that we were duped.
What he has done to serve our country. Every endorsement matters, and this endorsement matters a great deal, Liz. And
we're up against some really, really powerful forces of history and powerful narratives. And the implication of that is there will be backlash. I would not want that to be a model for my politics. You know, you are not attempting to make a statement for the entirety of it. But I guess I feel like at a certain point, somebody's legacy or somebody does something that is so large that it's tough to think about their legacy and take that out of it.
I think in many ways we've stopped doing politics. We've written a lot of people off. And in writing them off, we are losing.
You've actually marshaled unprecedented support from Republicans in this election. Why do you think that is?
On the issue of partisanship, yes, we're going to have disagreements, but I actively invite good ideas from wherever they come. That's why I'm going to have a Republican in my cabinet, by the way.
Former generals, secretaries of defense, secretaries of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, CIA directors, and National Security Council leaders under Democratic and Republican presidents, Republican members of Congress, and even former Trump administration officials agree there's only one candidate fit to lead our nation.
But to begin to have the view that you don't bridge disagreement, you sort of draw a line around it and you say, that's not even an okay position to hold. That there can be no compromise with it, there can barely be engagement with it.
Unfortunately, many liberals have taken a turn into stifling dissent with cries of racism and bigotry every time they hear an idea that they don't like. To me, being liberal is a constant evolution of ideas as time goes on. This concept doesn't mean changing my ideals or my morals from day to day, but it means that I can change as the world changes.
What they took, and something that really empowered Trump in the last election, was a sense that they didn't. And like, we were against them, and if so, they were going to be against us. And I think that's, in the end, doing politics badly.
Never before in all our history have these forces been so united against one candidate as they stand today. They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
Here's the deal for liberals. The only way you can get the society that you want is by, first of all, a forthright and serious fight against the forces of bigotry, which will not be achieved by civility. It's going to be achieved by confrontation. And secondly, by a radical commitment to democratizing the economy and socializing and decommodifying mass parts of economic activity, to align democracy in the economic sphere with the civil and social sphere. As long as those spheres are misaligned, and as long as such an unbelievable amount of inequality, abuse, oppression, and exploitation exists, there is always going to be a ripe spot in the immune system for the barbarism of our moment.
I love the idea of abundance, but I'll put forward a thesis and you respond. We don't suffer from a lack of abundance. What we suffer from is this oligarchical zeitgeist where we've decided to optimize the U.S. for the top 1%. And we don't suffer from an increase in market capitalization and an increase in wealth. What we suffer from is policies that essentially insert certain companies in between the consumer on some public goods, including healthcare, housing, prison system, where the objective or the metrics are shareholder value, not the public good. Private company inserts themselves in the middle. It does a great job, innovation, applies technology, and then creates market power, raises the prices, and we end up with 1 in 4 households with children in red states are food insecure. Isn't it, I mean, quite frankly, just to sound like a liberal, isn't our problem not abundance, but quite frankly that we are slowly but surely sequestering all the abundance to the 1%?
Sometimes I would say the answer to our problems is that the oligarchy is getting in the way of achieving our outcomes. But let's talk about housing for a second. We have allowed habits and customs and rules and regulations to get in the way of what you and I and Ezra all want, which is more housing supply.
I've seen the poll tax be introduced. I've seen the undermining of the health service. I've seen the growth of social division in Britain. I've seen the wipeout of a third of our manufacturing base.
To modernize policy and organization is not to change or dilute our socialist values. It is instead to revivify them and make them relevant for the new challenges of a new generation.
What we're trying to do is argue for an expansion of what the state is capable of doing and delivering. Sometimes it is deregulation. Sometimes it is cutting through bureaucracy. Sometimes it's bringing a lot more expertise and capability in-house.
I have to say to you, I make no apology at all for making sure that the Labour Party reaches out and builds new support.
And I would advocate institutionalizing the abundance agenda as the best framework for reimagining governance in places like New York and in the United States writ large.
Thank you.
If we don't escape the market tyranny, then basically we will always at the end of the day get fed back into basically neoclassical mindset or those types of economic policies, because capitalism is so destabilizing and it exerts so many forces on everything else. We're constantly finding ourselves in crisis, and the most powerful sectors of society are always clawing back reforms.
And I just want to say thank you for making it happen. Thank you.
In order to actually step into that world of broader capacity and abundance, we need to truly democratize the form of the economic realm. This is a synchronized moment for an actual humanist socialist politics. And it's not just an ethical demand. We need to recognize that utter zombification, the collapse of the mainstream corporate Democratic Party.
I really struggle to see center and center-left coded institutions also coming up with their own version of a story that I think will make sense for Americans what's happening in this moment right now. What story would you tell about America in the year 2025?
What I would say in response to that is, yeah, stories are for children. Americans need a plan. Americans need solutions.
This formula was electorally successful for a brief period of time, and it matched the proliferation of knowledge workers, brand consultants, economists, professional classes, as well as tech bubbles. That ideology and the conditions that led to it and the compromises that it evoked are over. The point is to give an answer rooted in what I'm calling a cosmopolitan socialism, or a map forward for the left that I think actually synthesizes and transcends these false debates between economics and democracy, truly recognizing that, in fact, this project must be truly global.
People in this class have divided themselves and say, I'm black and I hate white people. I'm white and I hate black people. I'm Latin American and I hate hillbillies. I'm hillbilly and I hate Indians. So we fight amongst each other. And why? Because they want to keep you to believing that I'm your enemy.
When you go and look at the radical lineage in the United States, Fred Hampton, incredibly young guy, is articulating solidarity.
What we're saying is that there are white people in the mother country that are for the same types of things that we are for, stimulating revolution in the mother country. And we said that we would work with anybody and form coalition with anybody that has revolution on their mind.
Understanding profoundly our interdependence, both to each other and in our broader ecology.
Panthers are here. Panthers are here. Uptown. For anyone who lives in Uptown, with brown, green, yellow, purple, or pink. But I say Panthers are here, and you'll have to tell us what we can do and what we can do together. We come here with our hearts open, you cast to supervise us, where we can be of help to you.
From across cultural and regional groups, not to force a specific culture on society. That doesn't mean you for a second compromise on your values.
Stop this shit one way or the other if we have to fight with guns. Before you can do that, gotta be some discipline. What I say you want to do. Okay, the first thing is discipline, man, before you can even control the pig, or you all can, man. From here, you start out going into the community so the community know, man, what you're doing. Because see, if the pig off you, Roger, and you be going to the funeral, man, you've been in a casket, and the people in the community don't even know you're dead. You got to have the community back.
This ability to self-access and not exclude anybody in a fundamentalist, fanatical way actually incentivizes the types of self-inquiry and capacity to actually truly transform institutions, individuals, economics, and behaviors and culture. I've never seen somebody more committed, frankly, to a broader set of values: Marxist, Christian, humanist, civic, and revolutionary than Cornel West. That synthesis, that broadness, that's why I admire the man so much. There's too much focus on making socialism a social distinction. It's not. It's a movement for liberation that means including many different people.
Not just a critique of neoliberalism and all of its various forms, but the ways in which mainstream, streamlined discourses tends to devalue and demean what the fundamental aims of something like the Bernie Sanders campaign is about.
An interesting week in the presidential campaign. Hillary Clinton is about to have company on the campaign trail in the form of this guy, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders.
Okay, thank you all very, very much.
He says people should not underestimate me. That's the warning tonight from Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders.
He's a long shot.
A long shot.
I don't think he's going to be taken too credibly.
Bernie Sanders is a socialist, for God's sakes.
A thick Brooklyn accent.
He's 73 years old. He looks 91.
With Bernie Sanders now in, it looks like we'll find that out. The Vermont Independent faces challenges like Hillary Clinton, fine-tuned political machines, and of course, cash. But he says that's the point.
Our country belonged to all of us, and not the billionaire class.
The self-described democratic socialist is unapologetic for his brash talk, which may just play into his favor. Sure, one poll shows him down 60 points to Clinton, but Sanders could make the entire field uncomfortable.
The bottom line is we are a centrist country. On our good days, we're center-left. On our bad days, we're center-right. But we're centrist, and we're not going to elect anyone who appears through their rhetoric or their narrative to be too far off center and to be a little bit too radical. And calling yourself a socialist, even with the qualifier of Democrat in front of it, just isn't going to work in America.
I think Democrats win when we run on real solutions, not impossible promises. When we run on things that are workable, not fairy tale economics.
You've got Bernie Sanders calling for a revolution.
He's offering sort of big structural changes.
What you call it, structural change person.
Force Americans to make these radical changes.
It says fundamental structural change. That's an abstraction.
If we get free tuition, government-funded tuition here, it has to come from someone. Those people will be the one who lose. If you have larger Social Security benefits, the higher income people during their working lives will be the ones who lose. If you get into arithmetic here. So there will be tremendous forces against everything you've advocated here. Right. So what do you do with it? Let's not tell me you can just wish it to happen.
Let me rephrase it.
Oh, Bernie, you want to turn everything upside down. You're going to create chaos. Go to the hood. Go to the barrio. Go to the reservation. Go to working class communities everywhere. Things are already turned upside down. The suffering's already there. We want to make sure poor and working people are treated in such a way they have decency and dignity. We want to abolish poverty. Yeah.
In the last 30 years, you know what's happened? There's been a massive redistribution of wealth. You know that?
I agree completely.
It has gone from the middle class and working families to the top 1/10 of 1%. I didn't hear the establishment moaning about how radical and crazy it was. This is what the campaign is about. I know it's outside of mainstream thinking. Are you ready for this one, Chris?
Yes.
All right.
I think I can take
it. Is to revitalize American democracy.
Let me tell you a little bit about myself, because this, my political profile and who I am and where I've come from is different than any other member of the United States Congress. Now, why is that?
I, Bernard Sanders, do solemnly swear.
I, Bernard Sanders, solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The time when you decided to run, Ronald Reagan had just won the presidency. He had even won Vermont. And yet there you were as a Democratic Socialist deciding to run for mayor. What made you make that decision?
And basically it was an attempt to involve people in the political process to revitalize American democracy. And one of the accomplishments that I am most proud of in my life is between my first and second term, we came close to doubling voter turnout.
Wow.
How's that?
That's pretty incredible.
So people had given up on the political process, mostly lower income working class people started to get involved.
How did you do that?
Here's a radical idea, all right? We paid attention to the needs of the people.
The fact of the matter is that history is being made in the United States right now by a candidate who is running for President of the United States.
It was the first time that he had decided to get involved in Democratic primary politics. He actually went and led a caucus in Vermont for Jesse Jackson, spoke for him on the stage.
This candidate is attempting to put together a coalition, a rainbow coalition, a coalition of black workers and white workers and Hispanics and Orientals, a coalition of young people.
We need guided leadership, not misguided missiles. Partnership. Let's choose Head Start, public education, and daycare, and prenatal care on the front side of life, rather than jail care and welfare on the back side of life. All right, we want a new direction. We want government to be all the people. I'm telling the real story of this campaign. It's not just about voting, it's about reviving dreams. It's about reviving hope. We're winning every day. When I win this campaign, there are no more impossible dreams. I'm pushing back mountains. I'm lifting ceilings. There are no more impossible dreams. We are winning every day. New Jersey, your time has come. We are winning every day.
This week, Jesse Jackson made it clear to even the most persistent doubters he's no longer a candidate running for a cause, but rather a serious force in the Democratic Party. Jackson won 5 states on Super Tuesday and now ranks second in delegates among the Democratic candidates. Still, the conventional wisdom is that Jackson can't win the nomination because of his race and because his views are too liberal. Conventional wisdom the candidate continues to ignore.
Again, the exciting thing about Jackson's campaign is that this is a guy who comes from the grassroots. We say, well, this guy has never been a senator, he's never been a congressman or a mayor or a governor. That's right, but he has been in the streets. He has put his life on the line, fighting not only for the legal rights, the moral rights of black people, but of all working people. This guy has had the guts to be where the action is. He's been on the picket line with strikers. He's been in demonstration. He has put his life on the line at dozens of different times. And I think one of the things, to be honest with you, that I think is impressing people all over the country, and people say, well, why is Jackson doing so well? I think aside from his political views, where he is touching the nerve of this nation in beginning to speak about issues that other candidates shy away from, about who owns America. The other issue, I think, the other reason I think that people are responding to him is they appreciate the courage of this guy. He started out with nothing, with no money. A black man attempting to get elected in a system which has never in a million years thought to elect a black person. And I think people are impressed with his courage, with his dynamism, with his willingness to articulate issues that are relevant to the disenfranchised, the poor people.
I may be poor, welfare. But I am somebody. I may be in jail, but I am somebody. I may be uneducated, but I am somebody. I am black, beautiful, proud. I must be respected. I must be protected. I am somebody.
50% of the people in America have given up on the political process. They don't even vote. Who talks about those people? Who talks about them? Mike Dukakis talk about them? Gephardt talk about them? They're non-human beings. They're not part of the political process. And one of the interesting points, people are talking about, if Jackson gets the nomination, can he win? Well, who knows? And I think what the experts are saying is, yeah, the conservative whites are going to desert him, which is perhaps true. But the interesting question, in fact, the most interesting question that modern American politics has ever seen, and will see, is will the 50% of the poor people, the working people, who are now not participating in the political process, who have given up, can Jackson get some of those people to jump in and say, for the first time in my life, I'm poor, I got nothing, I can't pay my phone bill, I can't pay my health care bills, I'm going to vote because Jesse Jackson is standing up for my rights. Can he begin to get to those people? I think he can.
Good evening. Campaigning for New York's Tuesday primary is down to the final stretch, with the Democratic frontrunners running close. The latest ABC News Washington Post tracking poll gives Michael Dukakis a small lead over rival Jesse Jackson, but that lead is within the poll's margin of error.
Obsessed with turnout, the Dukakis campaign made a special effort for fear that Dukakis had failed to motivate many who would vote for him. New York's primary campaign ended the way it began. Jackson drew big crowds, not only in Harlem, but on chic Fifth Avenue, Midtown.
Good to see you, Brad. Need your support.
Dukakis pleaded with New Yorkers to keep him the front runner.
Good morning. Appreciate your help today. Thank you.
Jackson came under fire today from New York Mayor Ed Koch, who called Jackson a liar and said he's unstable under stress. Jackson declined to respond directly to Koch's remarks.
Mayor Koch, he savagely attacked Jackson, who now is likely to carry New York City. He endorsed Senator Gore, who now trails in the voting.
One of today's headlines, a reminder of the extraordinary role Mayor Ed Koch played, repeatedly attacking Jackson.
And he thinks maybe Jews and other supporters of Israel should vote for him. They got to be crazy.
Well, of course, in this case, you had a mayor with a strong supporting cast who led the drive using race and religion as a litmus test, which really lowered the character of the campaign.
Many voters seemed embarrassed by the New York campaign.
They really did emphasize the race issue, and that was a bad thing.
I think it was pretty dirty.
A horror. I live in this city. I think the mayor should go back to school to learn something about how we live together in the city.
There is a feeling, particularly amongst blacks, that greater deference has to be paid to their prior and even current condition, so that the language that you might employ with others, direct, wounds them more than is permissible. That was particularly true with the Jesse Jackson situation. Everything I said about Jesse Jackson was true. They said, yes, but you shouldn't say it, or you shouldn't say it that way. You have to understand the symbolism that's involved. And if I had to do it over, I would take that into consideration.
With 99% of the vote in, Dukakis leads with 51%. Reverend Jesse Jackson trails with 37%. Tennessee Senator Al Gore Jr. lagged way behind with 10%, and with that poor showing in New York.
I do not think he's a spoiler. I think he is one who will give it a good shot, and then if it's decided that his going on the ticket would not be helpful.
Don't you surrender, and don't you give up. Don't surrender, and don't give up. Why can I challenge you this way? Jesse Jackson, you don't understand my situation. You'll be on television. I wasn't always on television. Writers were not always outside my door. When I was born late one afternoon, October 8th, in Greenville, South Carolina, no writers asked my mother her name.
Nobody chose to write down our address. A mama was not supposed to make it, and I was not supposed to make it. You see, I was born to a teenage mother who was born to a teenage mother. I understand. I know abandonment and people being mean to you and saying you're nothing and nobody and can never be anything. I understand. Every one of these funny labels they put on you, those of you who are watching this broadcast tonight in the projects, on the corners, I understand. Call you outcast, low down, you can't make it, you're nothing, you're from nobody, subclass, underclass. When you see Jesse Jackson, when my name goes in nomination, your name goes in nomination. I was born in the slum, but the slum was not born in me. And it wasn't born in you, and you can make it. Wherever you are tonight, you can make it.
Vermont's Bernie Sanders was first elected to the U.S. House in 1991, becoming the first independent to win a seat in 40 years. Yesterday, he talked with a group of students here at School Without Walls.
And the reason that I'm delighted to be here today is that one of the issues that concerns me very much is that young people your age, by and large, know very little about how government works, know very little about politics. And if ordinary people and young people and working people and low-income people don't vote and don't participate in the political system, who do you think is going to be making the decisions? It will be made by the people who have the money, who will make decisions that influence the lives of your family and yourselves. So the first point that I want to make this morning is if anyone tells you that politics is crap, it's garbage, don't get involved, do not believe them for a moment.
And at the same time, didn't see Sanders involved in much in the post-2009 Obama era fights. He didn't use his position either to leverage media attention to progressive fights. He didn't organize progressives in the Senate to form a bloc.
Bernie Sanders is with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie Hour now officially here on the Thom Hartmann program. Senator Bernie Sanders with us. It's our Brunch with Bernie Hour, our national town hall meeting. Senator Sanders taking your call. And here with you, Senator Bernie Sanders is on the line with us. Our Brunch with Bernie. Senator, welcome.
Good to be with you, Tom.
Brunch with Bernie with Senator Sanders here. So what's up in the Senate this week?
Well, there is a lot of stuff going on. My mind is kind of focused on what's going on in the Budget Committee because I'm the ranking member there. We have to take a very deep breath and try to figure out where we are as a nation. We are certainly nowhere near being a vigorous democracy. We are moving more and more, in my view, toward an oligarchic form of society. And how do you turn it around? Can we turn it around?
The systems are broken. Our basic core systems are broken.
What you will find is that the White House, members of Congress, members of the Senate receive huge amounts of money from wealthy people, big money people. Every once in a while, you'll see the president go to a little fundraising dinner in Washington. And any of you can go to that fundraising dinner too. The only problem is, you know how much you have to pay to get into that room? About $25,000 a plate. Now, why do people pay the $25,000? And that's just a small part of what they pay. Because they understand when they put that money in, their needs get taken care of and not the needs of your families.
When President Clinton first appeared before a joint session of Congress in early 1993, the rhetoric was still about change and reform.
Tonight, the American people know we have to change. But they're also likely to ask me tomorrow and all of you for the weeks and months ahead whether we have the fortitude to make the changes happen in the right way. I am asking the United States Congress to pass a real campaign finance reform bill this year.
The members of Congress seemed only too happy to play their roles in the charade.
He made a series of implicit deals with the power centers that exist in Washington. One of them is the leadership of the Democratic Party in Congress. and just to take one issue, campaign finance reform, he could have forced the Democratic Party to face the music and actually do real reform. Instead, he went to the Hill and said to the leaders of the House Democrats, I'm not going to press the issue with you because you're my allies and friends and I need you on other issues, and I'm not going to burn you on this issue. And so the issue sat there for 2 years. It dies.
I don't think there's going to be a popular outcry until there's a crash. We've got to do something about that. We've got to get ready for it. And when that happens, when that crash happens, there will be that populist opportunity. There will be that populist moment. I see it building right now in the popularity of people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren.
Big project we're pushing right now is we're spearheading a draft Bernie Sanders for president campaign. We think 2016 we should have a debate.
We want to get Bernie to run.
Yeah, so tell me about this. Senator Sanders.
Senator Sanders, we want Bernie Sanders to run for president in the Democratic primary.
How does that work?
Well, he's making a lot of noises that he wants to run, and we certainly want him to run. Who better to defend single payer and Social Security than Bernie Sanders?
What you're seeing is populism. You're seeing people saying, we're being ignored, we're being screwed, we're not going to put up with it anymore. We may not know who's ignoring us or who's screwing us, but we're not going to put up with it anymore.
And I know that there are millions and millions of people who feel as strongly as I do about these issues. But in the real world that we live in, where money has so much sway over the political process, where media determines what they will cover and what they will not cover, who's worth covering, who's not worth covering, these are all issues that have to be taken into consideration. Are there millions of people who are prepared to work hard to take on the billionaire class? And the answer is that's what we're trying to ascertain.
Don't you think that could be better accomplished by Elizabeth Warren running against Hillary Clinton, and then you have Bernie Sanders still run as an independent?
My understanding is he got in when he got in because he wanted to make sure that Warren wasn't going to run. And
right. He really pushed her hard to run, and she didn't do it.
So he jumped in to talk about wealth inequality and then realized that this really could resonate.
This country today, in my view, has more serious crises than at any time since the Great Depression of the 1930s. For most Americans, their reality is that they're working longer hours for lower wages. In inflation-adjusted income, they're earning less money than they used to years ago, despite a huge increase in technology and productivity. So all over this country, I've been talking to people, and they say, how does it happen? I'm producing more, but I'm working longer hours for lower wages. My kid can't afford to go to college. I'm having a hard time affording health care. How does that happen? While at exactly the same time, 99% of all new income generated in this country is going to the top 1%. How does it happen that the top 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%?
What we are going to do this evening is something extremely radical, almost unheard of in the United States of America. We are going to practice democracy. How's that?
Bernie it's not just that he's running as a socialist. He's been in Congress since the 90s, and he's always self-identified as a democratic socialist. And I actually think particularly for younger people, when they realize that this is just really, there's nothing radical about it. This is just the governing philosophy of many parts of Western Europe, and certainly is the governing philosophy that created the infrastructure of places like the Scandinavian countries and France, which is why they have better outcomes in health and education. And Bernie's not shying away from that label at all.
Is it really possible for someone who calls himself a socialist to be elected president of the United States?
Well, so long as we know what democratic socialism is. And if we know that in countries in Scandinavia, like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, they are very democratic countries. Obviously, the voter turnout is a lot higher than it is in the United States. In those countries, healthcare is a right of all people. In those countries, college education, graduate school is free. In those countries, retirement benefits, childcare are stronger than in the United States of America. And in those countries, by and large, government works for ordinary people in the middle class rather than, as is the case right now in our country, for the billionaire class.
I can hear the Republican attack ad right now. He wants America to look more like Scandinavia.
That's right. That's right.
Yes.
And what's wrong with that?
That answer is so beautiful because that's all you need. When you talk about the conversation with the mainstream media, That's what you need in those exchanges. Of course we should be more like Scandinavia when it comes to cutting down on childhood poverty. Of course we should be down, we should have no childhood poverty. We should have no poverty, period. Of course we should be like Scandinavia when it comes to delivering healthcare, free public education.
It took me a while to come around to the idea that a real movement had formed around him. And that he himself was beginning to recognize that.
Is this something you expected? There are a lot of people here. Thank you all very much for being here. This campaign finance system that we have today, it is a corrupt system.
We talked on this show right before you got in the race, and we talked right after you jumped in the race. How do you feel now compared to then?
In a slight state of shock.
Last week, Vermont Independent Senator Bernie Sanders, who's challenging Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination, drew the largest crowd of any presidential candidate, Democrat or Republican, so far this election season.
Stopped seeing himself as a gadfly and saw himself more as an actual political actor who was now on the world stage and had a chance to actually succeed in making some transformative change.
9 months ago, we came to this beautiful city. We had no political organization. We had no money. We had no name recognition. And we were taking on the most powerful political organization in the United States of America.
It really, in many respects, was like that, where he realized in, January of 2016, like, oh my gosh, I did,
right.
He entered in as doing an issue campaign.
Tonight, only because the senator dared to stand alone for so long. I speak the language of democratic socialism only because he spoke it first.
But Bernie Sanders has given us a map. I mean, it's revealed for us. It's sort of like this metaphor that I've been using for a lot of things lately is this concept of a dye tracing in watershed analysis, where they pour dye into a river and you can sort of, what looked previously like a river, you can now see the patterns, right? I almost feel like the Bernie Sanders campaign is that for the electorate. So we can see where we have bastions of left-wing support or potential left-wing support. We can see where we already have a foothold and we need to be putting in effort to build up institutions.
This incredible crack that we actually do see in cross-sectarian, class-based organizing. It's there. It's emerged across the globe. It's emerged in teachers' strikes and other strikes in the United States. And of course, in the U.S. context, first and foremost, in the Bernie Sanders campaign. Breaking through capitalist realism requires us all to end an individualism and atomization that has been forced on us. And again, it's not about building a subculture. It's about building a movement that allows us to come together as we are into something greater. A movement for people, no matter who they are, where they come from, that's unified on collective principles of basic dignity, goodness for all, not me, us.
And what that means is building sustained political movements that are mobilizing significant amounts of people and giving people a future that is worth fighting for, something that's worth sacrificing for.
Letting go of subcultural practices, like not being kind of like framing our politics as like a small in-group with like, insular kind of like ways of being.
Waging war against one another. It would be one thing if these fights were more ideologically clarifying, but now it's just ridiculous narcissistic squabbles that we're seeing. Things that if you were to explain the stakes to an everyday person would be incomprehensible to them.
Breaking through capitalist realism requires us all to end an individualism and atomization that has been forced on us.
The leftism versus working class politics or versus socialism. It's sad to see the less edifying, the less clear political ideology, one that is very amorphous and is always existing only in the moment because it changes consistently. What it means to be a leftist, what it means to be a leftist was a different thing in 2017 versus being a leftist in 2024. They're always changing. In fact, oftentimes contradictory. Now, being a socialist, that's something that has a root and a heart. It's an idea that everyday people can govern, that everyday people are being screwed over by the system. They should be enjoying the fruits of the work that they do. They should be living longer and better lives, not worse and shorter ones. It is the radical belief at its fundamental, its most fundamental, in democratic politics, in the idea that from the people, we can build a better world and a better future, right? That's what socialism is.
The little that I am, the little that I am hoping to be, I owe to the socialist movement. It has given me my ideas and ideals, my principles and convictions, and I would not exchange one of them for all of Rockefeller's blood-stained dollars. It has taught me how to serve, a lesson to me of priceless value. It has taught me the ecstasy in the handclasp of a comrade. It has enabled me to hold high communion with you and made it possible for me to take my place side by side with you in the great struggle for the better day. To multiply myself over and over again, to thrill with a fresh-born manhood, to feel life truly worthwhile, to open new avenues of vision, to spread out glorious vistas, to know that I am kin to all that throbs, to be class conscious, and to realize that regardless of nationality, race, creed, color, or sex, every man, every woman who toils, who renders useful service, every member of the working class without exception, is my comrade, my brother and sister, and that to serve them in their cause is the highest duty of my life.
Reopen those doors, recommit to doing mass politics, doing politics for the people, recommit to the working class, orient ourselves not just around them, but as a part of that movement.
If democratic socialism isn't about building a mass movement and all the complexity that it entails, it's not going to achieve anything except a new section of rhetoric in our politics.
Remember what it means to do mass politics, fighting these big fights against empire, fighting these big fights against capitalism, for your neighbor, for our friends and comrades and brothers and sisters all around the world.
What we need is a cosmopolitan socialism based on real material needs that expresses itself in criticism, art, movement building, and everything else that drives politics. I want people to be reading about Cuba, Russia, Thomas Sankara, anywhere. Taking from historical examples and finding inspiration is incredibly generative and incredibly positive.
You hear a Negro, Charles Howard, making the keynote speech, telling America he feels the dignity of a human being for the first time in his life. Here, now, and you feel proud. Rising up in a hall in Philadelphia like a Continental Congress a long time ago. And you're building a platform. People's dreams the hammer, people's needs the wood, and each plank driven home by many hands.
Experiential, global, engaged in acting on and receptive to the world sense. We are global. We
learn and move off of everything and contribute back to that. And that is affirmative, that is positive, and it's a better way to be. We need to recognize that along with Bernie Sanders here, the social movements here, Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, and land appropriation in South Africa, Haiti, Ecuador, Chile, the enormous bubbling up of resistance to the neo-fascism and Hindutva of the Modi government. We have a big fight ahead. Victory is far from guaranteed. But there are cracks.
Once a president, now a prisoner. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva is beginning a 12-year sentence behind bars. Convicted of accepting a beachside apartment from a company seeking government contracts, he and his supporters are continuing to say he's innocent. During an emotional hour-long address on Saturday morning, Lula told crowds that his conviction was unjust, but he'd abide by a court order to turn himself in.
A judicial coup blocked President Lula from running and almost certainly winning election. Due to investigative reporting and international mobilization, he is out of jail, leading in response to the disastrous Bolsonaro regime.
Mr. President, it's an honor to be here, and it's great to come from Brooklyn to visit you, and I'll briefly introduce us, and then we'll get started. So I'm Michael Brooks. I host a very creatively named show, Michael Brooks Show. And I'm here along.
It's very interesting, the sort of dynamics here, because there's no wokeness with Lula, but there's also none of this other like residual like patriarchal kind of stuff and nonsense, and he's sitting there and he's like, you know, he's union guy, no bullshitter, clear communicator, and at the end he goes, you know, being a president is like being the mother of a country, and when you're a mother you have to look out for the weakest kids. And I mean, it was perfectly sensible, it was beautiful. He connected it with the anti-poverty program, and I thought the clarity of that expression is completely missing here, and exactly I think what you're talking about. Let's go to Kerala.
The southern Indian state of Kerala is set to declare itself free of extreme poverty. It would be the first Indian state to hit this milestone.
I wish that the left in the United States, and one of the goals of this show is to have a much more genuinely global perspective. And sometimes when we generate movements, there's this idea that we're exporting them versus the sort of the history that, to me, in many ways, you exemplify. One of the reasons I admire your work so much, that this really is a global collaborative endeavor, and it works east, west, north, south. There is a shared working condition that's universal, and there are overlapping trajectories and aspirations, and we can learn from each other. Kerala, to me, is a very striking example of that, a Marxist state, or somewhat Marxist state in India, that has this extraordinary performance above its own nation state, and very relevant to not only the kind of immediate crisis of COVID, but the underlying conditions you're talking about.
I mean, look, it took 100 years for Kerala to build this. It's not just that there's a communist government in power there. You know, this is part of the history of the state, building public action into the culture of Kerala, into the society of Kerala, the importance of public action and so on. I mean, look, the United States had the importance of public action. It was such an important part of US history until the early 20th century.
When Bill walked on the picket line the morning of January 15th, he was fighting for the decent standard of living that Roosevelt had pledged in the Economic Bill of Rights. The right to a job, to food and clothing, to fair prices, to protection against monopolies, the right to a decent home, medical care, a good education, the right to economic security. Bill fought for this new Bill of Rights as part of a mighty CIO struggle against the economic royalists. At the National Labor Management Conference, CIO President Philip Murray had sought tenaciously for recognition of the need for wage increases and of price control. Within a week, 1.5 million CIO workers were on strike. Auto, steel, packers, communication, farm equipment, all fighting for a decent America. Lynn, Massachusetts, Ontario, California, Fairmont, West Virginia, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Jersey City, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Schenectady, Philadelphia, plant after plant, town after town, from coast to coast, the picket lines grew. Big lines and little.
When you create a society where public action is delegitimized, in the United States, there's been almost 100-year attack on trade unions, on people's organizations.
The union could not be isolated. Its strike machinery stood up, and Jim Matley's national director of organization for once was satisfied.
When the companies fail to isolate us from the communities, they try to smash us by the use of injunctions. Injunctions is the most reactionary weapon used by employers to break a strike. They have been repudiated by the American people and by Congress through the Norris LaGuardia Act. But employers use the injunctions to mobilize the police power of the state to undermine and break a strike. Even the Army and the Navy has been used for the purpose of breaking strikes. An injunction is an illegitimate offspring of an undemocratic government and reactionary employer in the name of law and order. It leads to violence.
UE locals in Philadelphia and Camden organized a protest parade, an orderly parade, headed by their country's flag, in the hands of a veteran of the German campaign. But when the parade started, trouble began.
And now they've thrown him to the ground.
You want to go to jail? Fine. You got it.
The pressure of the knee on my back and his hand on my neck, I felt like, is this it for me?
Said later, in excuse, that the police lost their heads. They certainly lost them in an organized manner. This is the result of having irresponsible officials in the city halls, the state capitals, and in Washington.
There's no mediation between the people and their frustrations and the elites.
First in a hospital? How many people died in the hospital but who were first in a nursing home? How many people do you presume died? Nursing home deaths happen nationwide. Democratic states, Republican states. We get a request letter from the Department of Justice. They were told, and they knew, and we gave precedence. Yes, because that's how it works. I don't really care what people say about me. I'm not going to allow people to lie to the people of New York without answering.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo took some blame for a scandal surrounding the state's nursing homes on Monday, after a state report that COVID-19 deaths among them were under as much as half. Cuomo acknowledged his office should not have withheld.
They said staying home would save lives, but you can't stay home if you don't have one. My name is Zahran Kwame Mamdani, and that was my family's story. In 1972, they were evicted and expelled from their home in Uganda because of the color of their skin. We immigrated to this city when I was 7, and today I work as a foreclosure prevention counselor. I'm here to talk today about the housing crisis across our state. All across Queens, I see the pain my family felt then in the faces of my clients now. Immigrant families forced to choose between their hospital bills and their mortgage, feeding their kids or keeping the lights off. Yet while my clients struggle, luxury developers continue to determine who deserves to live in Astoria. And if you're not getting priced out, you're getting pushed out.
In a place like Kerala, almost everybody is a member of either a trade union, a women's organization, youth organization, student organization, cooperatives, and so on. It's a highly organized society, so that when a crisis hits a place like Kerala, public action kicks in immediately. Unions come out there, they start feeding people, they build sinks in public, they do all kinds of things. In the United States, when you have a crisis, the magnitude of this pandemic, you don't see the trade unions doing anything. Where have the trade unions been to bring medicines to the elderly? Where have the trade unions been to feed the homeless, feed the poor? You just don't see them anywhere. So let's talk about that. Let's advance the conversation. I'm more interested in that than in saying, oh, the whole debate, the whole struggle has been diverted by the elites and so on. I don't care about the elites. I don't care about Joe Biden. I don't care about the Democratic Party. They interest me nothing, because they are going to be disappointing always. That's not the way to think. I don't care about their blackwashing. I'm more interested in how do we advance the movement? How do young people who have entered into a movement, often for the first time in their lives, have been politicized? How do we show them? How do we, give them our sense of history and say, what's important?
There is only one answer. Vote and vote right. Canvassing, registering, voting. Sustained organized effort of every local in its community. Community political action will hold the gains of the picket lines.
You can raise your hand if you are already a DSA member. Okay. And now, can you raise your hand if you are not yet a DSA member? Wow. That's amazing. That is truly amazing. I am so excited to be here today, and I want to really talk to you about my journey with DSA, with this organization, and how I came to become a member of this organization and came to this point where I'm standing in front of all of you. So like some of you, my journey in organizing and my journey in politics began with Palestine.
Fundamentally, a politics of solidarity is about a belief in people, in your community and outside of your community.
How we doing? I'm so happy to be here alongside all of you today. It fills my heart and it fills my soul. This was the journey for me into politics. And so when you take that journey, as you may know, and you don't get into Palestinian solidarity activism if you have any interest in getting into elected politics in this country. It's almost like two complete opposite dreams.
Zohran Mamdani. He's an assembly member from New York 36th district. He's a different kind of a politician. You will find 90% of the politicians, they will speak for you when they need you. But not many politicians will speak for you when you need them. He's one of them, and I'd like to introduce him to the stage of the 4th session of the World Sikh Parliament. We're honored to have him here. Zohran, over to you.
Thank you so much. My name is Zohran Mamdani. Sat Sri Akal. I am the assembly member, as was said, of the 36th district. We are just about a mile or two away. Parts of Astoria. I did not have any hopes to become an elected official, especially where I grew up. I was born and raised in Kampala, Uganda. My father came of age in the independence era, fighting against the forces of colonialism.
Uganda is born again, free and independent.
Which was there prior to independence and that which was there post-independence.
The retention of many former colonialists as advisors is a major problem in Kenya because of the heavy investment, Prior to independence of the European, total social development of the African is held back.
Anything you call development is a result of people working together. They can work together for another. In slavery, they work together for another. In capitalism, they work together for another. But they can also work together for themselves. We are going to use these Ujamaa or socialist villages for the purpose of working together for our own good.
Can you talk about the African awakening of the liberation struggles with Kwame Nkrumah?
Yeah, so let me go back.
Yeah, tell me.
That was a unique time in history.
200 delegates to the All-African People's Conference heard a speech much to their liking by the Prime Minister of Ghana, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. He told them to aim at a United States of Africa to be formed on the model of the USA.
Brothers and sisters in the Caribbean now also being caught up in that euphoria of independence on the continent, and sisters and brothers from this country as well, them started coming back to contribute.
My reason for coming before you this evening is I'm concerned about Africans. I'm concerned about black people. Now, many people say to me when they see me, they say, Mr. Carmichael, we understand that you are just concerned about making black people better. And I say, yes, in a way I am. They say, well, if that's the case, you are a racist. And I said, no, you are the racist. You see, Africans are part of humanity. They are an oppressed part of humanity. If I benefit an oppressed part of humanity and free it, obviously I have benefited all of humanity, since humanity is indivisible. You understand it? So let there be no confusion.
As I see it, our greatest danger stems from disunity.
Nkrumah's vision was to unite the entire continent. And he said that's the only way we'll be able to survive, because they wanted our resources yesterday, they will want it today, they will want it tomorrow.
Africa is far from being poor. It is Africans who are poor, not Africa. And they are poor because of the uncounted profit that has been made out of the exploitation of their labor and their lands. We must therefore face the issue of African unity now, for only unity will make the artificial boundaries and regional demarcations imposed by colonialism obsolete.
Martin Luther King was disturbed somewhat by your movement, and he felt that possibly he was afraid that it would cause what was referred to back then as a white backlash.
Of course, my disagreement with Dr. King on this point, though minute, was that there's no such thing as a backlash. What there is that we're under racism, and we come to struggle against it. Certainly, as you struggle against any opponent, the opponent stiffens his resistance.
The entire imperialist world, not least of all the United States of America itself, is greatly concerned over this new developing relationship between black people in the two continents.
The peoples around the world, their consciousness has risen, therefore they are fighting back. And in America, those who will be called to go and fight, their consciousness has also risen. The problems are going to rise, and the only way to solve the problems is by taking away from the rich that which they have no right to have, and equally distributing it among all the people in the society.
You think that some sort of upheaval will have to take place?
Well, outside of the government structure, systematically speaking, there must be an upheaval. The capitalist system is in grave crisis, and every time the capitalist system finds itself in crisis, its solution is war.
The first wave was undermined because Nkrumah was overthrown in 1966 in Congo. Lumumba was murdered by the Belgians, by the US, and by Britain, because they thought if this kind of narrative really takes hold, Nkrumah convincing enough of these newly independent countries to form one unified United States of Africa. And then eventually they would be able to eliminate apartheid much, much earlier, of course, had the continent been united. Then there's a potential that we're going to lose dirt-free access to all these resources. And that's what it's all about.
It can be lightly said that the wealth and labor of Africa built America and Europe and keeps it sustained to this day. It can be lightly said.
And then you see a series of coups spreading throughout the continent. All these men with no vision, just running the country, fulfilling the interest of the outside world that wants to continue controlling Africa.
President Mobutu and I have had the opportunity to review and renew one of our oldest and most solid friendships in Africa.
Mobutu the example. He was sustained in power.
65 to 97?
To 97.
Yeah.
Sustained by the U.S., by France.
Cooperation between the United States and Zaire under President Mobutu's leadership stretches back through 20 years and 5 United States administrations.
After the great liberation leader Lumumba was savagely murdered.
Belgium is returning the remains of the icon of Congo's anti-colonial movement to his family. A single tooth is all that is believed to remain of Patrice Lumumba after his assassination in 1961. An official ceremony to hand back the tooth is being held in Brussels.
It doesn't matter how brutal you are to your own citizens and how destructive you are to your domestic economy. Right. That is not the criterion to have good relations with the West or with the U.S.
Torturing, murdering, but also loyal security and capitalist subcontractor.
Exactly. And you last long.
American leaders have learned to place a particularly high value on President Mobutu's insights and counsel. President Mobutu has brought a consistent voice of good sense and goodwill to the international councils where African issues are considered.
I said when I took over, I will make sure that before I hand over the government to another government, I must reorganize this country properly, and this is a part of my program.
The Asian community had only received an invitation to send representatives to meet the president overnight, and some of them frankly admitted that they were too frightened to attend. Finally, a dozen of their leaders gathered at midday at General Amin's house, the command post as it's called, to learn their fate. By inviting everyone together in the presence of the press, he'd effectively denied any single envoy or Asian spokesman the opportunity to influence his decision.
A man certainly of considerable energy, but also, some say, a dangerous man. Just how dangerous and just how important is what we are now going to discuss.
Please join me in welcoming Michael Brooks to Lafayette.
Hi. Good to be here. Can everybody hear me without a mic? Yeah. All right. I've only seen this in the movies, but I feel like I'm gonna lean on the board and get the chalk all over my jacket. Does that actually happen, Professor?
Hello, everyone. Hi. My name is Zohran Qawmi-Mamdani. So before I get into the specifics of the race and of our policy platform as a campaign, I want to tell you a little bit more about myself and about my family.
I have a pretty unusual background in some ways, which I guess is appropriate for unusual times.
Hello, you're on WNNZ.
Hello, this is Stephen from Ashfield. I think Clinton's going to win New York by a squeak.
You know, I happen to agree with your analysis there. But what do you base your analysis on, sir?
Well, I was hoping that I'm hoping that Brown wins it. I just think that it's kind of like Clinton's an idiot. And most of the people in New York, are kind of funked up. So if he's going to go in New York, he's going to get voted for.
You know, you've really been following this race. What's your first name?
Stephen.
Stephen, and are you in school, Stephen?
My parents were hippies, and they left New York when I was very little. They were totally broke, to be honest, and we sort of fled to Massachusetts in the kind of middle of nowhere. Or felt like the middle of nowhere. It's not actual middle of nowhere, but that's what I thought as a little kid. Like, can I swear? Sure. Like, why the fuck are we leaving New York? And I'm not gonna get too much into this, and I'm not gonna over dramatize my experience, but I do come from a family that dealt with multiple evictions, that dealt with chronic and consistent housing insecurity. And even into my adult life, those things that are fine to do when you're in your 20s and figuring it out, but if they persist later into your life, are actually incredibly damaging, like having to find house sits or couch surf. The massive economic costs and psychological toll of it cannot be overstated. And it's something that has affected me very personally and I care deeply about. It is an absolute fact of human existence that every single person should have a safe, warm home at night.
The idea and the image of a home, when I speak of it, I also mean the walls that surround us, the walls that we come home to every day and that we start our day in. I work as a foreclosure prevention housing counselor. And I go to work every day and I work with families who have spent decades in their homes and are now facing foreclosure. And you hear a lot of stories about why people face foreclosure. And a lot of times an emphasis is put on individual mistakes. And then when you meet these families that are going through foreclosure, you hear the truth is far from that. It is a story about employers who scale back hours without notice. It is a story about an unforeseen emergency. It is a story about a medical illness that took away the family's savings and the ability to make monthly payments. And in working in this job, it made me realize that we are judging the people who have been victims of this system. And yet we do not have time to judge the system itself.
All over the United States and around the world, the city itself is being lost. The great cities of the world are becoming exclusive playgrounds of the oligarchs, the super rich, while longtime residents are forced out. We see this in New York City. Most of the Manhattan skyline is owned by wealthy people parking money here, while the needs of the real people across the economic board are ruthlessly undermined. And this is the same story in San Francisco and London and Paris and anywhere else.
Additionally, having to reckon with the question of what has happened to us and who are we without our home.
They queue for permits, they queue at ministries, they queue at the bank, but still they can't get out. Less than 8 weeks are left before the deadline runs out.
And you don't know what to do next. You don't know what to do. Just run up and down.
In August of 1972, the then president of Uganda, Idi Amin, got on the radio and made an announcement that within 90 days, all Ugandans of South Asian origin were to be expelled from the country.
The president denied that his decision was either racialist or anti-British. The mass expulsion was purely in the interests of Uganda's economy.
I took this decision for the economy of Uganda, and I must make sure that every Ugandans get a fruit of independence.
There was tight security at the station, designed to ensure that none of the expelled Asians left the train to slip illegally into Kenya. For many of the older passengers, the train journey was the final irony. They or their parents had originally emigrated to Uganda to build the railway, which was now being used to expel them.
In the frame of those few minutes, my family's lives changed. They were rendered stateless. And all that they had spent their life building, and all that those who had come before them had spent their lives building and considering as home, was taken from them.
How will you feel about leaving?
Pretty sad. I've lived all my life here, and it's a beautiful country. And I'll really feel sad when I leave, because I used to think it's my own country, at one time, because I'm born here.
If they don't go by the time limit?
I think they will be sitting like they're sitting on the fire. I will tell you this. You just wait after 3 months.
What will you do to them?
Okay, you will see.
You said you wanted Uganda.
I think they will not sit comfortable here in Uganda. I will tell you this.
They went to England, which is where they had to go. And they lived in a refugee camp.
The first of the special flights bringing the expelled Asians to Britain, many told of being robbed at gunpoint before leaving.
These would be people
who would be rotting in concentration camps simply because of the color of their skins. I cannot believe that anyone in this country, with our sense of fairness, of humanity, and of responsibility, would have regarded such an outcome as being acceptable to the British people.
If these other Ugandan nations come, there's no doubt that they will add to overcrowding, and once they arrive within the city, it'll be extraordinarily difficult to keep track of them. We won't get rid of them once they've come.
After their ordeal in Uganda and the harassment and strains of their journey to Britain, the first few families were installed in their houses. They'd already been on English.
My family did eventually leave the camp and found a more permanent residence in London, and yet my grandfather and grandmother would still go to Gatwick. And they would watch the weekly Sunday flight take off to Entebbe, to Uganda's international airport. And they would go every week, and they would wish nothing more than that they could get on that plane and that they could go home. Because not only had they lost their lives, their home, their families, but especially for my grandfather, he lost his sense of self. And I think of all of the other children who have both gone through that and who are going through that today. And they look around and they're facing the same questions decades on.
Where were you born? In Palestine? Yeah, I am born in Palestine in Deir el-Qassi village, Acre district.
All your family here in the camp?
Yeah, all my family is in the camp.
How many?
They are 6 persons.
How old are you?
I'm 17 years of age.
Married?
No, spinster.
Do you want to go back to Palestine?
Okay, surely. Naturally, I want to go back to Palestine.
Why?
Because this is my own land. I want to return it, you know. This is my land.
Is there any chance of these refugees being allowed to return to their homes?
Well, of course, you know, more than 8 years ago, they had to leave their homes in Palestine, and Palestine is now Israel. Israel is a member of the United Nations, and unless there was some basic decision by the United Nations that they could all go back home, it looks at the moment as if some of them will probably have to be resettled elsewhere.
We have a map that shows historically the areas that used to be Palestine in 1946, and then the UN plan there, and then as it shrunk down to basically Gaza and the West Bank, right? And then present. So what does that show you, Martin, that the area where Palestinians are living, has it grown increasingly smaller?
Well, absolutely. Of course, this is what it's all about. It's all about the land. And what this map shows you, and I must say it's pretty shocking when you present it in this way, what it clearly shows is that if there is no peace agreement between Palestinians and Israel, more of those green areas, more of that Palestinian land will be eaten up by Jewish settlements.
Palestine was always a struggle that was very near and dear to me. As soon as I got to any kind of level of political consciousness, the contradiction around Palestine struck me.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Washington Spotlight. One of the most controversial issues on the world scene involves this bitter conflict between the Arab states and the new nation of Israel in the Middle East. It could explode into another war. We've had a lot of heat on it, very little light. We hope to shed a little more light.
You have to remember that the Arab refugees who are in the Arab countries do not want to be settled anywhere but in their own homes. And that's a basic problem.
I'd like just a moment to get this back to an American focus.
We said we cared about freedom, we cared about justice, we cared about safety, we cared about peace even.
I know that Israel attempts to meet international standards of human rights. I know that they could do a better job.
I think Israel's human rights record is problematic and moving in the wrong direction under the current right-wing government.
Israel's a very, very important ally of the U.S. Certainly some of the actions that are being taken there are deeply problematic.
I believe that Israel, like a lot of other countries, wants to do the right thing.
I think that there are some challenges with Israel that need to be addressed.
And I believe that Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East.
but we also have to care about her neighbors.
Could you expand on that?
I think that ongoing issues that we continue to see in the conflict between Israel and Palestine are complicated.
I think we have a problem right now in America with the way we are debating issues surrounding Israel and Israel's security.
Just on a personal level, do you feel like it meets the standards of human rights that you'd like to see them meet?
Well, I think they could do, yes.
I do. Yes.
I think Israel does meet international standards of human rights.
Do you want to say anything more?
Yeah, I mean, I think Israel, I've said before, and I believe this, Israel is the one essential country on the planet.
I'd be hesitant to say that they are in violation of those standards.
My commitment right now is to affirming Israel's right to exist, affirming Israel's right to defend itself.
I think that Israel as a country is dedicated to being a democracy and is one of our closest friends in that region, and that we should understand the shared values and priorities that we have as a democracy, and conduct foreign policy in a way that is consistent with understanding the alignment between the American people and the people of Israel.
Does Israel meet meet human rights standards to your personal satisfaction?
Well, talk in more detail. What specifically are you referring to?
As a country overall, in terms of how they...
Overall, yes.
We need to be a neutral broker. We could get things back on track, work with our allies, and get to a two-state solution.
I believe that we can get back to kind of policies that affirm that two-state solution, affirm human rights, and that America can be a force to accomplishing that in Israel.
Before I call upon Secretary Schultz, I would like to call upon members of the committee who have opening statements. And I'd like to recognize the distinguished ranking member of the committee, Senator Pell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In the last 2 years, the situation in South Africa has deteriorated steadily, dramatically. And the turmoil gripping South Africa is obviously rooted in the evil and inhumane system of apartheid.
Cape Town, South Africa, the place where the European settlers first landed, is now living under the laws of a police state. In Cape Town, hundreds of people have been arrested. Many have simply disappeared.
They are there for 24 hours a day. When you go out, you see a Casper. When you sleep, the Casper is outside. So they are just as if they live there.
Inside the ring of roadblocks, the black population of Cape Town are living in a state of siege. Some of them are refugees from the recent fighting between the Conservatives and the militants known as Comrades. All of them are subject to sudden checks, searches, and arrests. Under the government's emergency regulations, police action in these areas cannot be reported. Filming secretly, we set out to tell the story of what is happening to these people.
For the last 5.5 years, the administration has sought to encourage the South African government to move away from apartheid through its policy of constructive engagement.
I want to speak this morning about South Africa and about what America can do to help promote peace and justice in that country. America's view of apartheid is simple and straightforward. We believe it's wrong. We condemn it, and we're united in hoping for the day when apartheid will be no more. Our influence over South African society is limited, but we do have some influence, and the question is how to use it.
This policy, which increased cooperation with the South African government while reducing public, if not private, criticism and pressure, is and is widely regarded, in my view, as a failure.
Many people of goodwill in this country have differing views. In my view, we must work for peaceful evolution and reform. Our aim cannot be to punish South Africa with economic sanctions that would injure the very people we're trying to help. I believe we must help all those who peacefully oppose apartheid, and we must recognize that the opponents of apartheid, using terrorism and violence, will bring not freedom and salvation, but greater suffering and more opportunities for expanded Soviet influence within South Africa and in the entire region.
Mr. Secretary, but I want to tell you something. What disturbs me more than the policy that you call a policy is the rationale for the policy. You say on page 14, we must not become part of South Africa's problem. We must remain part of their solution. We must not aim to impose ourselves, our solutions, our favorites in South Africa. Damn it, we have favorites in South Africa. The favorites in South Africa are the people who are being repressed. by that ugly white regime. We have favorites. Our loyalty is not to South Africa, it's to South Africans. And the South Africans are majority black, and they are being excoriated. It is not to some stupid puppet government over there. It is not to the Afrikaner regime. We have no loyalty to them. We have no loyalty to South Africa, to South Africans.
We claimed to hold these universal ideals, and then when it came to applying them to Palestinians, we drew a line in the sand.
I think it's about time we stop, those of us who support, as most of us do, Israel in this body, for apologizing for our support for Israel. There's no apology to be made. None. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. Were there not an Israel, the United States of America would have to invent an Israel to protect her interest in the region. The United States would have to go out and invent an Israel.
It is in our nation's best interest to continue military and economic assistance to Israel because this vital aid encourages long-term stability in the region and demonstrates United States commitment to Israel's security and sovereignty.
I want to assure both the American people and the Israeli people we are in constant and close consultation. I think the levels of coordination and consultation between our militaries and our intelligence, not just on this issue, but on a broad range of issues, has been unprecedented. And I intend to make sure that that continues during what will be.
This stuff really matters. In the United States, you get to at least play a nominal role in defining how the U.S. empire behaves. And this is important because it affects every single inch of life on Earth. This is important because the problems that are generated by globalization, by interventionism, by basing, first of all, oppress brutally much of the world, and secondly, also loop back here.
And this money is going to a state that is not only militarizing itself, becoming a garrison state, is not only, busting the sanctions in South Africa that supposedly the United States is trying to put economic boycott around apartheid to end, but it's also violating U.S. standards of human rights in the occupied territories, killing Palestinians, and the U.S. State Department report itself said that Israel violates human rights.
I always say to my friends when they say those things to you, I say, imagine our circumstance in the world were there no Israel. How many battleships would there be? How many troops would be stationed?
The U.S. signaled it would not be restraining its ally, Israel.
Whatever the mechanism is that is acceptable to the Israeli government to not see violence used against its citizens, then, of course, we're not going to stand in the way of that.
Israel will continue to do everything in its power to avoid civilian casualties.
But there are many questions as to why Israel would target a place they know houses the handicapped.
Where are our human rights? This is a disability center. What did they do? What is their fault?
Israel must periodically cut the grass, knowing that the stalks, or militants' weaponry, will eventually come back.
It's a reality that we could not accept, and therefore the government ordered the military to take steps in order to prevent this aggression.
The pattern has been repeating for years.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told his soldiers today to prepare for a significant expansion of the operation, one that could last up to...
What is new about the level of damage that Israel's inflicted over the last 24 hours?
Hundreds killed so far, about a fifth have been children.
Last night was very horrific. I think it was the model of the state terror. I mean, unprecedented since the outbreak, the launch of this offensive on Gaza.
It's only getting worse in Gaza tonight. Israeli troops are pounding the place with artillery. They've even targeted a hospital.
They hit our house, says this man. 70 or 80 people were in our house looking for sanctuary, and they hit us. He watches as his 5-year-old daughter is treated for her wounds in this Gaza hospital.
Gaza is a civilian entity, pure civilian entity, with inhabitants of 1.8 million on a geography of 360 square kilometers.
We've seen civilian casualties before.
Although we support military efforts by the Israelis to make sure that rockets are not being fired into their territory, we also have said that our understanding is the current military ground operations are designed to deal with the tunnels, and we are hopeful that Israel will continue to approach this process in a way that minimizes civilian casualties.
And the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, warns the military incursion could be expanded. Almost 300 Palestinians...
May is disabled, and the centre that cared for her was targeted in an Israeli airstrike. She survived, but her injuries are severe.
Listen, I am not going to deny the strong feelings that people have. I don't know that anyone who has seen the images who would not have strong feelings about what has happened.
We're here walking along the beach in Tel Aviv, and as you can see, there are people out, their families out, enjoying the sea, as they should. It's peak summer. But I can't help but think when I'm walking along the coast here that if you follow the coastline exactly 60 kilometers south in that direction, you're going to reach Gaza. And there, rights groups are saying that there's a genocide and a famine taking place, which obviously feels extremely different to what we're seeing around us here in Tel Aviv.
I do believe we have an opportunity to end this war, bring the hostages home, bring relief to the Palestinian people, and work toward a two-state solution where Israel and the Palestinians in equal measure have security, where the Palestinian people have dignity.
Specifically with the refugee camp, do you think that that is a legitimate military target, that it's an acceptable?
We are not telling Israel how it should conduct this war.
Mr. Secretary, maybe it's because I come from the civil rights movement in this country. We sat there and we heard the same kind of arguments, the same exact arguments. We cannot impose from the north a solution on the south. They must work out their problems black and white together. We cannot, as a nation, expose them to the economic ravages that will come. We must consider what will happen after segregation before we eliminate segregation. My Lord!
We did not dare to apply those things to Palestine.
Many of us have been disappointed repeatedly over and over again. How is it that people who stood up for South Africa cannot recognize that the same kind of apartheid is at work?
What should be done with the Palestinians on the West Bank?
Well, I think that the Palestinians in the West Bank are going to be offered the full human rights, the full civil rights, as no Arabs are offered in the Middle East. No Arabs whatsoever have any full human rights or the right to vote for their own government.
I stand with Israel because of our shared values, which are so fundamental to the founding of both our nations. I believe the bonds between the United States and Israel are unbreakable, and we can never let anyone drive a wedge between us. And as I toured Israel's Supreme Court, I was struck by the iconic architecture, which embodies Israel's founding principles of democracy and rule of law.
I felt lied to. I felt lied to by my craft. I felt lied to by major media organizations, and by media organization, I mean like producers of books, films, etc. Like the whole corpus of storytelling, which is what this book is obsessed with. I wanted to know how that happened. I wanted to know why there was so much difference between what you saw and what I saw, and what I felt like I understood back here in America, and what most people I knew understood back here in America.
That Americans do not get a fair picture because of prejudice in American the press and so on. Do you believe that's true, Mr.
I certainly do believe it's true because of my own experience, Mr. Childs, as the executive.
You believe that prejudice keeps the Arab viewpoint from being told properly?
Yes, one of the things that we worry very much as my federation is getting more information to the American people.
There have been huge shifts in America on how people think about Jews and Israel, and I think that is especially true of young people. So we are now wrestling with a new, I think, generational divide here. And I think that's particularly true in that social media is now our source of media. And this, it used to be that the media you got in America was American media, and it was pretty mainstream. It generally didn't express extreme anti-Israel views. You had to go to a pretty weird bookstore to find global media and fringe media. But today, we have social media, which is a global medium. right? It is shaped, its algorithms are shaped by billions of people worldwide who don't really love Jews. And so while in the 1990s, a young person probably wasn't going to find Al Jazeera or someone like Nick Fuentes, today those media outlets find them. They find them on their phones.
في هذه المنطقة كما نشاهد حجم الدمار في هذا المكان أحد الشهداء في هذا المكان كما نشاهد
TikTok just smashing our young people's brains all day long with video of carnage in Gaza. And this is why so many of us can't have a sane conversation with younger Jews, because anything that we try to say to them, they are hearing it through this wall of carnage. So I want to give data and information and facts and arguments.
Our team has lost 50 members of family in the last 3-4 days alone.
And how is it for you watching that from here?
Oh, it's so painful. I'm disgusted by what's happening. This is a genocide happening in front of our eyes.
We have, that word is, as you know, incredibly emotive, and the Israelis, as you know, will be saying that they are targeting Hamas only, that they don't target civilians.
That's simply not the truth, unfortunately.
Planned, military incursions.
Yes, but this is not the truth.
Even just a moderate and clear recognition of Palestinian humanity, you're not hearing in any substantive and consistent way.
I have asked repeatedly in my interviews whether there is a single network, mainstream organization in America with a Palestinian American bureau chief or correspondent who actually has a voice to articulate their part of the world. I am most concerned always with those who don't have a voice, with those who don't have the ability to talk.
But at the same time, we recognize that Palestine has never given up. Palestine will never give up. We see the Palestinian people who are refusing to give up, who will not give up on their people, who will not give up on their history, who will not give up on their culture, and who will not give up on their ability to express solidarity with other people who are struggling all over the world.
It's not a civil war.
Or the conflict.
It's not a conflict. It's a liberation movement fighting for justice.
Well, whatever it might be best called.
It's not whatever, because this is where the problems start. Because this is what makes you ask you all your questions. This is exactly where the problems start. This is a people who is discriminated, is fighting for his rights. This is a story.
We fight for a real peace, and this peace cannot be achieved except when justice is built, when a progressive social society is built in Palestine.
If you will say it's a civil war, then your questions will be justified. If you will say it's a conflict, then of course it's a surprise to know what's happening.
So it really bothers me how they view Palestinians in general and how they think this is a role. And how they think Palestine is only demolishment and bombs and airstrikes. Okay, unfortunately, we're under occupation. I can't romanticize life under occupation, but still, despite everything, we Palestinians love our lives in Palestine. I love my life in Gaza.
الله يسلمك يا حبيبة قلبي.
كيف كان الوضع؟
سبحنا بمي يرتلع.
نور.
لا انت احلى واحده نسكافيه
اتضيف.
طب شو بدنا انت في اكبر من هيك.
Hello everyone, I'll show you what and where are we eating today. Okay, this is Muhammad, this is Hatem, and Muhammad's wife cooked for us, so finally a proper food. I'm standing right now inside the first refugee camp in Gaza Strip. Here is what it looks like. مرحبا، صباح الخير، فرجيهم مذكرات. قاعدين بدنا نسمي الدفتر، اوكي؟
شكرا. تضلك تطعميني.
These are the equipments for a journalist that got murdered by the Israeli forces, so no matter if you're wearing them or not, you get killed. These are the equipments for a journalist that got murdered by the Israeli
voices, so no matter if you're wearing them or not, you get killed.
Emergency and health workers rush to the scene, along with journalists from a ground floor media tent. It is all broadcast live by Al Khad TV from the street below. The damaged camera and live streaming unit are held up and shown to the crowd. Visible on the staircase is Mariam Abu Daga working for AP. Al Jazeera cameraman Mohammed Salama and freelance journalist Muath Abu Taha in the final moments of their lives. Reuters cameraman Hatem Omar, seen here in a red t-shirt, films the scene on his phone. A rescue worker says they carried 2 body bags down. As they gathered remains of a third body, there was a second explosion. It was 10:17 a.m., 9 minutes after the first strike. Footage filmed seconds later is too horrific to show.
What is the point of waiting the humanitarian and medical staff to arrive to a specific area and target them once they arrive?
Israeli statements have evolved over the past 48 hours. Israel's Prime Minister called the deaths a, quote, tragic mishap.
You would be left wondering, why does any of Israel exist? What a horrific place, committing horrific acts on a daily basis. So I think the question is central and key. You write a book that delegitimizes the pillars of Israel. It seems like an effort to topple the whole building of it. So I come back to the question, and it's what I struggled with throughout this book. What is it that so particularly offends you about the existence of a Jewish state that is a Jewish safe place and not any of the other states out there?
There's nothing that offends me about a Jewish state. I am offended by the idea of states built on ethnocracy, no matter where they are.
Muslim included.
I would not want a state where any group of people laid down their citizenship rights based on ethnicity.
The objective description of what the situation is, what apartheid is in the Middle East, in Israel-Palestine, is, on the face of it, some of the most simple and clear things to understand in politics. If you have a historical understanding of the American South, if you have an understanding of apartheid South Africa.
When I talk to my friends in and around Israel, Palestine, I would say to them, they go like, oh, how can anyone call it apartheid? And then I'll say, okay, let's do it this way. You tell me what's different. I'm just going to tell you what apartheid was.
Right.
I'm just going to tell you what it was. And I would like you to tell me where you see a discrepancy.
Right.
And I go, okay, so in apartheid, your ethnicity determined what your life could be, where you could go, what job you could get, how long you could stay in the major part of the town where the power was held, or, where you could move or not move. That's what apartheid did. Then they're like, okay, it's like that, but, and I'm like, no, don't give me reasons. Let's forget reasons for a moment. Yeah. Let's just talk about what it was and what it wasn't. And I go, apartheid also said that you couldn't vote depending on your ethnicity, or yes, but and I go, you're my friend. I'm not indicting you. I just want you to tell me how it's different to apartheid.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's ended at, yes, there's many similarities, but it's because. And I go, I have yet to find a thing that happened in our past that didn't have a because.
It's always like that. And what I don't think folks realize is that's actually a further indictment. That's actually because you sound like the thing you think you're not.
Are you not concerned about the binary between either condemning Israel entirely, being like also a stance that a lot of like very strong and notorious anti-Semitic people agree with, versus seeing this as more of a complex issue where it is wrong what's going on, and that there's also a way to do this, that Israel still exists and is supported?
So it's not a complex issue. That's the big thing. It's super simple. There's one group that has enormous power. It's the most powerful country in the Middle East. It's backed by the United States. It acts on another population of people with total impunity and is never held accountable for anything. So there's no symmetry in the relationship.
The country of Israel is a state in which half the population exists on one tier of citizenship, and everybody else that's ruled by Israelis exists on another tier, including Palestinian Israeli citizens. The person that is guiding me is a Palestinian whose father, whose grandfather and grandmother was born in this town. And I have more freedom to walk than he does. He can't ride on certain roads. He can't get water in the same way that Israeli citizens who live less than a mile away from him can.
And why
is that okay?
Why is that? Why?
The Palestinians have done this, that, suicide bombings, terrorist attacks, etc. That's real. That's real. And nobody would like deny the pain of that. You know, the problem is the violence of the oppressed that's always the reason. That's always the reason, you know?
Palestine was always a struggle that anyone who cared about independence, about apartheid in South Africa, also cared about Palestine.
Justice is objective. And in order to deal with justice, we must be objective. There can be no sentimentality.
The history of the effort to end apartheid, you will see that there are moments in which there's an absolute refusal to engage in violent resistance. But then on the other hand, you have a government that is wedded to violence. And eventually, people in South Africa who were struggling for justice and equality came to the conclusion that they had to take up arms. And the African National Congress did take up arms.
From that time, however, we learned our lesson about fighting the Mahatma Gandhi way. And we resolved to take up arms for the liberation of our fatherland.
And of course, eventually apartheid was overturned, and that armed struggle now has the, one would say, the stature of the American Revolution, where people also took up arms because it was not possible to guarantee American independence without doing that.
I just gave you that Nat Turner example, right? And I say, well, I think killing babies in the crib is wrong. Like, I don't think I could do that, right? But that doesn't justify slavery.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? That doesn't make, that doesn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
the loop, that's where the loop, yes.
Because, you know what I mean? That therefore justifies, no. And I think like this is like a principle thing that cannot be gotten past. Either you think there are good reasons for segregation, apartheid, Jim Crow, or you don't. You know what I mean? And in my mind, there is never any reason. You know, like my dream of liberation is not like enslaving white people. That would be wrong. Like I oppose enslavement. You know, I use the death penalty example all the time. I am opposed to the death penalty. There is no because for me for the death. There is no, you know, he's a serial killer, killed 30 people. No, I'm against it. I'm against it for Dylann Roof. Like I'm against it. There's no because for me. You know, and I think we all have those things. It's just the fact, the bare truth of it is some of us do not have those things for apartheid.
But with Hamas emerging the victor, the Bush administration joined Israel in refusing to recognize the vote and attempting to isolate the group as it assumed full control of Gaza.
Some seem to believe that we should negotiate with the terrorists and radicals as if some ingenious argument will persuade them they have been wrong all along.
It seems very difficult, surely, for you to engage in the peace process if, in opposition, you're prepared to take a stance like that on Sunday, where you personally appeared above a slogan saying, "Death to Arafat."
A member of my party said to me, you know, they keep talking about the slogan, and I said, where is the slogan? He said, it was right under you. And I said, I wish I'd known because I would have thrown it out.
Those who champion the cause of the Palestinians should recognize that if we see a further escalation of the situation in Gaza, then the likelihood of us getting back on any kind of peace track that leads to a two-state solution is going to be pushed off way into the future.
His surprising and crushing victory, the product of an 11th-hour push for right-wing votes, promising there would be no Palestinian state on his watch.
Certainly, the fact that he's changed his position has an impact. I'm not going to prejudge what we'll do. The election was yesterday. Those comments were made 2 days ago, so I'm sure we'll continue to discuss.
But Netanyahu is unlikely to reverse course.
But I think we're going to have to essentially start again on the peace process. And I understand why young Palestinian and Arab Americans in Michigan think too many people have died. I get that.
I think sometimes people wonder why should Americans living thousands of miles away from the Middle East be concerned with a question like this? Don't they have enough problems of their own? And I agree. I think there are a lot of problems in this country. I think problems stemming from the fact that there is no funding for poor people to go to hospitals and get medical care. There isn't enough money going around for student loans to get an education, to enable them to have a better life. There isn't enough money to provide jobs or provide housing. I come from New York. Every day when I go home and I come back, I see hundreds of homeless people, and it breaks your heart to see this situation in supposedly one of the richest countries in the world. Meanwhile, the United States spends vast amounts of money on the military budget. The highest recipient of all foreign aid is Israel. And even if you talk about the homeless problem, we have 3 million Palestinian homeless refugees, 3 million refugees. If you stop this aid, you will resolve both the Palestinian political homelessness and the American homelessness problem. So we're very much in the same, corner, and there is a need to bring the Intifada home to the American people and have the American people working alongside the Palestinians in order to stop this flow that is not helping anybody, but is bringing disaster all over.
Building solidarity is not just a question of sympathy. Solidarity is sharing community with people who, by definition, are not the same as you in every category. It's something the left has struggled to do.
And I ask myself, why is it that those who are so radical about every single issue in this country are willing to draw an exception for one?
Too many in the left aren't willing to do that work. They aren't going to come prepackaged sharing all of your beliefs, cultural prejudices, and social practices.
We're going to have to do more than talk. We're going to have to do more than listen. We're going to even have to do more than learn. We're going to have to start practicing, and that's very hard. We got to start getting out there with the people. A lot of times we think we're better than the people. That's insult and that's criminal.
There is shared human desires. There is shared universal traits. Most all human beings really want the same things. There's a shared global human experience. But then there's also a variety of different contexts and ways of discoursing about those experiences and how to get there.
I moved to this city when I was 7. This is the city I fell in love with, the city where I got my citizenship, where I got married. And yet there was also a point where I knew I was a New Yorker. I didn't know if I had a place in New York City politics. I thought those two things were separate.
And I found that when I was first getting involved in politics, there was a fetishization of purity that could be achieved by separation from power.
Acceptance doesn't mean that you're not making distinctions. You want to understand the engine of different worldviews. To have flexibility of mind and emotions, to move in between worldviews, pivot in between them, and start to create some of that synthesis.
You can't expect anything without organizing for it. And I know that there are those who disagree, but I do think that there is an opportunity to have our voices heard within the state. As so long as there's power in any place, we have to contest it.
A political party in this country that is the potential vehicle of labor. I think the soul of the Democratic Party is in some respects what we choose it to be. Is it Bill Clinton? Or is it Fannie Lou Hamer?
I've been beaten in jail till my body was hard as metal. My house was bombed January 28, 1971, but I'm not stopping. In 1963 or 1964, we didn't have many people registered in the Mississippi. But today we have 60% of the black population registered in Mississippi. We have 42 elected officials in the state of Mississippi. And one day you will be proud when you can say, Senator Fannie Lou Hamer, because I'm on my way, baby.
I choose to have a certain vision of the Democratic Party because I want to make that enacted and real in the world.
And then there was this campaign which showed me that there was room for all of us. And you didn't actually have to give up any of yourself to be a part of it. And that inspired me to understand that politics isn't just something that you believe in, it's also something that you do as an active thing. And it was in that campaign that I first met New York City DSA. And what stood out to me about DSA was that DSA meant what it said, that it wasn't just empty rhetoric, that this was an organization that understood a fight for a worker here is the same fight for a worker anywhere. And whatever our brothers and sisters deserve in our own neighborhood is what every person deserves everywhere.
This is a model that is about what does it actually mean to be truly global to the extent we can, and to be local, national, and international simultaneously.
Solidarity means empowering people to win power and write their own rules. Fundamentally, a politics of solidarity is about a belief in people, in your community and outside of your community. It's a belief in the possibility that we can come together and build a genuinely democratic world in all spheres, including the economic one.
We need to have a much greater understanding of both how other people are seeing, experiencing, and then enacting in the world. This is a necessity, cultivating empathy, cultivating compassion, cultivating awareness, to really develop patience, the capacity at synthesis, and also complexity and nuance. This is not another moralistic story. These are all completely countervailing forces to the market technologic that subsumes all of us today.
More money in our pocket, more dignity in our lives, more rest and joy.
The attempt to constantly humanize and not dehumanize your fellow humans. Not in that milquetoast centrist, meet in some crappy middle, but literally that we need to humanize as many as possible and then try to create cohesion to enact real systems change.
On the verge of a victory that will resonate across the country and the world. Make no mistake, this victory will be historic not just because of who I am, a Muslim immigrant and a proud democratic socialist, but for what we will do. Make this city affordable for everyone. If New York truly is the city that never sleeps, we deserve a mayor who fights for those of us who labor at every single hour of the day. I will be that mayor. And I will be a mayor who doesn't bow down to corporate interests, doesn't take his orders from billionaires, and sure as hell doesn't let ICE steal our neighbors from their homes. There are no kings in America, whether that's Donald Trump, Andrew Cuomo, or the Republican billionaires who fund both of their campaigns.
This is how it was done. We organized the Young Progressives of America. We built a fighting platform on peace, jobs, and democracy. We made a beginning, a good beginning.
We are young, we are strong, we are brothers. We're set for the job to be done. We are claiming this country for all of us. We have welded our strength, we are one. We've learned and we've labored together. Together we'll fight and we'll win. We are young, we are strong, we are brothers. And from here you can come.